You were live.
All right. Welcome to the BEMA, Lubbock BEMA discussion group.
Yeah.
Tonight we are discussing episode 9, Letting Go. I mistakenly said it was going to be the blood path on Sunday. It is not. Oops. It'll be the blood path next week. Letting Go starts off in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1.
Okay, I did listen to that one.
The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." So, we don't think about that being a big deal at all.
No.
Like Abraham leaving his house. It's like, yeah, duh, everybody leaves their house in America. But in the old East, they did not leave their house. It was a weird thing to leave your house. And I was thinking about how if my dad or my grandpa had made, like, I don't know why I thought about a Whataburger, but Whataburger was our family legacy or something. And my dad ran it, my grandpa ran it, and it's my turn to run it, my son will run it, or whatever. I was thinking about that, like, this is how they did things.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, if you don't carry on my legacy, what are you doing?
Farms are that way.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody I grew up with, they were on the farm, and they were already 3 generations deep on that land. And for a kid to not want to farm, wanted to go leave and do something else, that's a big deal.
Get a rope.
Yeah. It was a big deal because it's who you are. You have to do this. It's who you are.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
In some ways, I'm jealous of the old way, because being in America, you have to, like, everybody has to pay their own road. And it's like, somebody described it like being in a hallway of doors, and you have to pick which door you're going to walk through. And it's like, I just end up in the hallway hanging out because I don't know which door to go through.
Right.
So I'm just stuck here.
Like choosing a movie.
Yeah.
There's too many choices.
Yeah. So it's like, I'd rather just have somebody tell me what to do.
Yeah, that's hard though, because I don't want to be a farmer. I could have been, but I don't want to be a farmer. So if I even stuck doing that, that would be terrible. Because you're stuck doing something you don't want to do.
Yep.
You know? So I guess it's a double-edged sword, you know.
That's like us growing up, though. Like, imagine Abraham growing up. There's a land, you can go that way.
Yeah.
That's it. You can't go be a rock star.
Right.
You can't go, be in telecommunications because there's no towers.
Right. I just wonder how like, we don't think about legacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
True.
We don't really think about legacy.
We think about our own legacy.
We do think, and even that, we don't think that much about it. We think about retirement, is what we think about, but we don't really think about legacy in terms of, like, what I'm going to leave, the mark that I'm going to leave. So the best way to put it.
Right.
But for them it was, and I don't think about my dad's legacy.
Yeah.
I sure don't think about that. Man, it's just so different in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like, my grandfather was very disappointed that I didn't take over the farm. I think he wanted his son to, my uncle, and my uncle went on to college, and that's not what he wanted to do. And then I kind of stepped up to help him at the farm. I think that was his expectation, was that I would eventually take over the farm. And I think he was kind of disappointed again when I just like, hey, I'm going to the military, I'm out of here. Because I realized that's not what I wanted to do. There was a lot of great things I learned from it, a lot of great memories. But I think he was definitely disappointed that I didn't. So,
The concept of the family and leaving your home or leaving you see it in the New Testament too, when Jesus says, I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. Because that was all part of that deal. You'd find your wife.
right.
You'd go back to your dad's house and build on a room so that you and your wife could live. So you lived literally next door to your dad, and he lived next door to his granddad. They just kept adding on another room, and that's what Jesus said. He was using that same imagery when he said, I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. When I'm done, I'll come back and get you. And that was the courtship, bride, marriage kind of a thing. So it's even in the New Testament, it's still there. Mm-hmm. And you see it in James and John, who were fishermen, and how they left their father Zebedee to go fish. And that was we have a lot more options. My dad really didn't want me to do what he was doing. He was hoping for something better than that. Not that it was a bad thing. He did good. He had a good, hard-working job, but he didn't want me to do it. He always wanted something else, something better.
I think that becomes the attitude. I think my dad was the same way.
Yeah.
Like he wanted me to have a desk job, and I have one now, but it took me a while. But that's what he wanted. Like everybody wants something better for their kids, but back then it's like I just want you to do
Well,
what
this
I'm
was
doing.
the best choice for your kids back then.
So I was thinking about while I was thinking about all this, I was thinking about I wonder how many problems arise from this attitude of always wanting to make your own path. I think about I was driving around one day and you see now hiring sign on like every single fast food restaurant, but everybody's wanting to go on American Idol or X Factor because they think they can sing, and then they end up making a fool of themselves because they can't sing. It's like, you go work at Whataburger until you figure out what you can do, and then you go to college or advance yourself. But everybody wants to jump straight to the top. So I found a really awesome article with the Midrash in it. Oh, it was so good. So it starts off talking about what was so special about Abraham or Avram, and that's what we kind of talked about last week. And he was saying, what are the character traits that motivated God to choose this man over all others? Last week we kind of talked about that, and we don't really think about why God chose Abraham. But these Midrash stories give so much more. So according to this one story, it says that Abraham's birth was predicted by the astrologers of King Nimrod, who perceived the infant as being a threat to Nimrod's kingship. Terah hides young Avram in a cave to save him from death. Emerging from the cave at the age of 3, Avram observes that there is a powerful God above nature who created nature. It is this God who he worships. So I was immediately thinking about Jesus, Moses. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is crazy.
Retelling of that.
Yeah, but this is before Moses. It's just amazing how many. I wonder when they wrote that, when they had that story, if it was passed to them or whatever.
It also reminds me of Greek mythology. Like when Kronos was eating all his kids, and then it came down to Zeus and Rhea. She hid her son away in a cave with Gaia. I was like, what? Okay, yeah,
That's crazy. So it said. It shared the story that, before Abraham or Avram left, he stages a riot among the idols in which he claims that a large idol smashed others in order to take their grain offering as his own. Terah, upon returning to the shop, refuses to believe the tale. After all, the idols aren't alive. Abraham catches his father in this logical flaw. Why worship the lifeless work of your own hands? And then in another similar tale, it says that his dad goes off and leaves him at the shop by himself. And while Abraham's there, this man comes in who's 60 years old and he wants to buy an idol. And he's like, how old are you? He's like, 60. He's like, oi, the man who's 60 years old needs to worship an idol that is a day old. And the man was embarrassed and left. So it's like, immediately Abraham is punching everybody in the face with these facts. That these things don't exist, and you need to stop worshiping them. So I think that's where the Jews get why God chose Abraham. And so we go on to Genesis 12:2-3. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the people on earth will be blessed through you. So we start to think about how in the Tower of Babel, everybody wanted to stay put and kind of get comfortable.
Right.
And God wanted Abraham to go out and share the blessing that he had been given. He didn't want him to sit on his blessing. And
You want them to be mobile.
Mm-hmm. But how can all nations be blessed through him if he's sitting in one place?
That's the problem. You know, and bad things happened when they sat in one place. You know, the Tower of Babel. They were more interested in making a name for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
No, didn't they talk about that as being in the other text, it was, you can't stay in one place. And now he's going to give them a land, so we would be in one place.
Mm-hmm.
They noted the interesting thing is that he still dwelt in a tent. So that even though he was supposed to settle, he was still mobile.
He was still mobile.
He was still mobile.
Yeah.
And the tower he built was the altar. That was he was building a tower not to himself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the big characteristics of here Abraham. He doesn't think about himself at all.
Yeah.
Why would God choose him was because he didn't build a tower.
Yeah.
He built an altar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He didn't.
but that was really
He
cool.
didn't settle. He kept mobile.
Yeah.
God said that's something I can use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that it made me think about when they talk about how God wanted to give him a land. Like God wanted them to settle, but whenever and wherever God wanted them to settle, not
Yeah.
on his own terms, on God's terms, right? It's for us too. I think that's one of the big struggles we have is we're looking for rest, we're looking for peace, we're looking for whatever, and it will come, just not now and not here. So we're looking for it here, and it's hard because it's not here. There is not peace. It's later. It's what God has for us later. But we're trying to settle here, and it's not. There is a settling, just not now.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest themes in this section was about not leaning towards our understanding. So when we're looking for peace, we have our own idea of what that peace is versus
Yeah.
what God intention for our peace is.
Right.
So that was probably the biggest theme I got out of this section was not linked to what we understand. And the whole point of doing the BEMA is to take another look from a different direction. And so I just thought that was a neat thing to realize.
Mhm.
All this we're about to read was part of the intention was to help Abraham release or let go of his own
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
knowledge and thinking.
Leave what was behind and look forward to what's ahead.
I'm sitting there thinking I'm almost 50 years old, and here's Abraham 75 years old. I don't even want to ever have to think about moving out of my house, and yet here he is, constantly on the move. And that is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Plus trying to survive, plus trying to make sure you get enough grain, plus making sure your cattle are fed, make sure everybody else is fed, make sure. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, wasn't 75 the new 30
Probably.
in that
I mean,
situation?
he definitely had some, what would they call that?
The chutzpah.
The chutzpah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely had some of that, some energy.
So right when I was listening to this earlier, I found this meme that said, "The comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there." And it's a picture of Jonah Hill when he was heavy set, and now he's skinny. But it's like, the comfort zone is a nice place to be and relax, but nothing grows there. We don't grow there. So as we said in verse 6 through 7, Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree Morah in Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. And in my note, I was thinking previously men built towers for themselves, while Abram built an altar to God. So rather than build a tower to himself to make his name permanent, he built a tower to God to make God's name permanent. And I was thinking about how in the movie Troy, Brad Pitt's character Achilles gets advice on fighting in the war on Troy, and he's like, what happens if I don't fight in this? Will I live? And she's like, you'll live and you'll have kids, but no one will know who you are. She's like, but if you go to this war and fight, everyone will know who you are. And it's like, that's the choice we're always given. Like, we can
Make a
do
name
something
for
that
it.
we just fade into oblivion, or we make a name for ourselves. And some people choose infamy, choose to do terrible things and make a name for themselves, and other people, like Mother Teresa, choose to do good things for people.
Now it says in verse 7 that the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." And so he built an altar to the Lord as he appeared to him.
Maybe that's why he was still in the tent.
Yeah. But he took his wife Sarah, though, and Sarah, or Sarai, she was barren and in her 60s. And so God tells him to go. He doesn't tell him where, but he's going to show him. And he says, "I'll go." And he takes his wife, all their belongings. And it didn't say that he invited Lot, but Lot said, Lot went with him. And, so he really believed the story. He didn't know how it was going to turn out. He didn't know where he was going to go or what it was going to look like. He didn't ask. He just went, and he took Sarai, his wife, who was barren, and God's going to give this land to his offspring. I just find that amazing.
That he doesn't think he's going to have. He doesn't think he's going to have offspring with his wife, Sarai.
Well, no, it doesn't say that, but did he have that much faith, knowing that God was going to do it? I don't know.
Well, that's
And then you wanted
What
to
we get to
discuss that a
later,
little
yeah.
bit later.
that's why he brought Lot to begin with.
Right.
Was that he didn't. It's not that he didn't
That's-
trust. He was like, in his human understanding, he's
Yeah.
like, well,
It didn't
this
make
dude can
sense.
have kids.
Yeah.
So I guess
And-
I'm going to bring him with me.
And he's my closest to an heir.
Yeah.
And that's all part of being in that household.
Yeah.
Right.
So, we think lineage is more linear, and for them, lineage was a little broader,
More branch.
because it included whoever was in that house. They were all part of that lineage.
And God kind of does the same thing with us. Like we're grafted in to the tree. We're not we're not in the tree. We're put into the tree. So then from there Abraham went out to the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, Bethel on the west of Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Now, I know I'd looked into the calling of the name of the Lord before, but I was trying to look into it today, and I found a few articles. It was getting late at work, and I needed to finish this up, so I didn't
Need to
keep
do some
reading
work.
them. Yeah,
This one.
I need to do some work. So I didn't get much into that. I know I'd looked into it before, but does anybody have any thoughts on calling on the name of the Lord? Does anything stand out to you so far that we've read?
Well, the thing that sticks out to me, what was his name? Because this was before Moses, I am that I am.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time we know that God had a name. So I wonder, what did he call it?
I think God revealed himself as El Shaddai, or I might be thinking of a different name of God.
Yahweh.
Elohim was.
El Shaddai, it was, they're like 3 or 4 titles in the book of Genesis that all refer to God.
Yeah.
God of the mountains, different.
El Shaddai is the one is that the one they said that if you translated it out, that's the one that's the God
Yeah.
who knows when to say enough.
Yeah. So it's like the part
Maybe.
L, from understand, is part
Mhm.
of the L part is
Mhm.
God's name.
Yeah.
So,
Like Israel,
yeah. That's right.
God
Yeah.
with us.
But I just wonder too, is that something that in the translation, does it mean literally the name, like name the way we think of a name, or does it mean the kind of the power of his
Yeah.
name?
Yeah, calling on the name. It's like being baptized in the name of,
Right.
or calling on the name of the Lord. It's more surrendering to that authority or recognizing that authority. So instead of being an idol worshiper like everybody else, he called on the Lord. He put
Right.
his trust and his emphasis was on something that wasn't seen.
Right.
So we baptized in the name of Jesus, or or the other phrases, they were baptized calling on the Lord. It's not necessarily shouting out his name,
Yeah.
but it's recognizing that authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking how interesting it was that the first thing God wants him to do is set out from his father's house, which means leaving his father's work His father's work is making idols. So the first thing Abraham or Avram does is mock his dad's work. Like you know what I mean? He's not like taking it serious. So God's like, it's like almost a double-sided sword or something. It's like, it's a bad thing, but it's a good thing that you're going against your father's work. But
I wonder too about, it says the Lord appeared to him. What, like,
What did that mean? What did that
was
look
it-
like?
What that look like?
yeah, was it just a shape of a man, or was it like
Was it like a
bush?
Jacob
Was he-
situation
was he-
where
was
it's just
he
a figure?
lit up? I don't, that makes me, I just wonder about that all the time. Because we just read past that so easy. But it says it over and over in different places, right? The Lord appeared. I'm like, what does that mean?
Right.
But-
We look at this I grew up dividing the history of the Bible, the patriarch age, the Mosaic age, and the Christian age. And in the patriarch age, it says God spoke directly to the patriarch. However that happened, I don't know how that happened. We're not really told that. But like God spoke to Abraham.
Right.
How he did it, we don't know. And then God spoke through the law in the Mosaic age, and God speaks through Christ in the Christian age. But
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
That's interesting.
Yeah. There had to be some develop with that relationship to all of a sudden hear a voice say, leave your father's house. And you get up and go, or you just, was it bad lunch?
Yeah.
So,
Voices in your head.
like, am I hearing things? Who's behind the curtain playing around? So you
Well,
imagine what that scene was like.
The other crazy thing, I just kind of followed the map here and kind of guesstimated how far Abraham traveled. If God called you, said, hey, I want you to start walking, and you're going to walk with all of your family and everybody, walk to New York City. He went further from Lubbock than it is to New York City in his travels. I mean, you're going all the way from here to the East Coast,
And you didn't know where you
Northeast Coast,
Just because the voice told you.
just because some voice told you. That is a long, long walk to think about your relationship with God the whole way there. That is a long ways. It was like 1,650 miles is about roughly what he traveled. And that's about the distance from here to New York City.
Was that in the whole time that he was traveling?
Yeah, so because he went to Ur, and then Haran is where his dad died. Then he goes down to Egypt, and then comes back. He goes up to where Shechem and Bethel, and so he goes all the way up to Lebanon, and then comes all the way back, basically down to Egypt, and then comes back into all the way back into Israel, where Israel will be.
I just wonder if when God presented himself to Abram or Abram, if it was kind of like when Jesus told, was it Thomas? He told him, I saw you sitting by the tree. Yeah. And so it's like he presents himself to Abram. He's like, I saw you leave the cave. You know what I mean? Like in the Midrash teaching when he was younger. So it's like that's when he realized like God was there. It was like when he looked out in this vast world and how amazing it was, and then God's like, I saw you when you walked out of the cave. I wonder if it was something like that, or if it just an all-powerful entity shows up. And
Well, do you think about Jesus in the Transfiguration, how he became radiant with light? It would have to be something that significant for Abraham to go, I just pooped myself. Basically, I'm standing here before the creator of all things, and I know it. And then get told what to do. It's like, yes, sir, let's go do it.
I wonder, you have something to say, Gordon?
Oh, no, I was just noticing after, God promised he was going to give him the land to his offspring. The next verse, he moved on from there to the hill country, east of Bethel, and pitched his tent there at Bethel on the west, and Ai to the east. So he came to the land that he was going to give him, and then he says, "Well, that's nice. Let's keep moving."
So going to verse 9, it says, Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while, because the famine was severe. And he was saying in the podcast that the reason why people went to Egypt is because they had the Nile, which was a permanent source for food to grow. And so when we think about Abraham going to Egypt, I didn't have the same thoughts they did about him going there, maybe worshiping the same gods the Egyptians worshipped. I didn't think about that,
Yeah, I
but
didn't
that's, I mean, that's a good thing to think about, because that would be a temptation.
I just wondered about, God says, I'm going to give you this land. I want you to go there. Well, it's hard, so I'm going to go to Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I saw it more like that instead of trusting the story and trusting the plan, that God would take care of him. The other side then, after I thought that was, well, God still provided because he's in Egypt. You know, it wasn't like, I'm going to give you this, but go down to Egypt and make sure you don't starve to death in the meantime, and that's okay. Because sometimes we get it too.
Yeah.
If you're going to follow God, it's just 100% all the way, and you don't. There's no.
No margin for error.
Yeah, we just make it, I think, a little more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Where going to Egypt was not a bad thing,
Yeah.
and in fact, that's how he got wealthy, you know, or it added to his wealth. So God was still in control and taking care of him when he went to Egypt,
Yeah.
and like he will be tomorrow.
Yeah.
I appreciate how they talked about him having the responsibility of all these people was part of his decision making. And I know sometimes when we talk about him, this was his point of disbelief. But we got to remember, up until this point, or at least I haven't read it, where God provided something miraculous for him.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know God in that experience of God providing something. So at this point, all he really had was his experience of what he should do. And he wasn't doing it out of disbelief or anything, but he was trusting what he knew. Because at this point, that's all he had. And so I think this was just one of those things that I thought, we all have responsibilities. We trust, there's a fine line between trusting God and doing our part. And until you hear something out, all you can really do is do what you know to do. And so I think that's what happened here, is that he was trusting, but then trying to find what his part to do was.
I was thinking he's in this barren wasteland, and then he's like, "Oh, there's McPharo's over there."
Hey, the Lord has provided that, right?
Why do I want to stay up here in the desert when I can be down there by the beach?
By the cool water, yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder though. There's some things that we just don't know from the story, because I mean, God could have been like, yo, just chill out. Don't worry, you don't need to go down there, or he could have, God could have said, yeah.
Yeah, this is a severe famine. Why don't you take your family and get down there?
And we don't,
Because he knew the whole story.
right. Right.
We
maybe
can't,
just
we
things we
can't
don't
bang
know.
on him too much for going to Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole scenario reminded me of that story about the guy on the roof when there was a flood, and he's like praying to God, like, help me, and then a guy on a boat comes along, and he's like, all right, jump in the boat. He's like, no, I'm waiting for God to help me. And then somebody else comes along, the same thing. Somebody comes in a helicopter. He's like, nope, I'm waiting for God to help me. And then he ends up in heaven. Like, I sent 3 people to help you, dude. Like, what's your problem? That's what that reminded me of. Like, just go to Egypt. It's not that big of a deal.
It was like this little note here also.